Good morning. I am Stephanie Goff. I am the Greene County engineer, and today I'm going to go over about construction activity and stormwater requirements here in Greene County. So why are we here? As you are most likely aware, we have the Clean Water Act, which is part of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program, or better known as the NPDES process. This is a permitting process that is mandated by the EPA. Essentially, construction activities that are disturbing 1 or more acre of total land, or is disturbing less than an acre of land, but is part of a larger common development, and disturbing more than an acre, is required to have a permit to discharge stormwater from the site. You can visit more information about the Ohio EPA's construction general permit as far as those requirements on the site. But essentially, this has been in effect since 2018. We're required to look at not only stormwater quality, but also stormwater quantity when we are reviewing construction site plans. An NOI is required from the Ohio EPA, which as part of that NOI, you are required to have a SWIP plan or SP3 completed prior to actually submitting your NOI. We are an MS4 community here in Ohio for Greene County and representing the townships. So we review all SWIP plans that come into our office that's disturbing 1 acre or more. And we are also ensuring that stormwater runoff is controlled effectively using BMPs. We are responsible for administrating, as drainage engineer, responsible for administrating the phase 2 NPDES process in the unincorporated areas of Greene County. As I mentioned before, that means us doing plan review and construction inspection of all new subdivisions and site developments. This program is designed to limit erosion and stormwater runoff from construction sites and keep us in compliance with phase 2 regulations. So what do you need to do before construction begins on your site? First, recommend go ahead and just meeting with us. We will go over the process with you. If you're going through the subdivision process, obviously we'll be going through that with you then. But you can be watching this video also to have that information. But if you're developing a site, these are in general the quick and dirty list of what we're expecting from you. We require the following documents be submitted. So you're going to need to have a site plan. You're going to need to have your SWIP plan, which is including your plan sheets, your drainage calculations, all those type of things. What types of BMPs are you using during construction, and what is your BMP after construction? And again, we have to look at water quality and water quantity when we're reviewing these sites. As part of this process, the Ohio EPA has a SWIP3 checklist. It's available on our website, or you can visit the Ohio EPA's website also. What we ask is when you turn in your application that you include the checklist completed, showing that you've gone through this to make sure your plan is complete. That will speed up the process of us being able to review your SWIP plan. Also, you need to request your NOI somewhere through this process through the EPA, and we ask for a copy of that. And then we have our own stormwater permit application, which gathers the information from use, which allows us to be able to do the inspection. Requirement of the EPA also is for you to have a BMP maintenance agreement with a long-term maintenance plan. So you need to have what those inspection requirements are required during the construction, and then what are those required long-term to keep these BMPs properly operating. So those could be what type of inspections you need to do, how often do you need to inspect outlets, those type of things, and what maintenance items need to occur. As far as the requirements of the EPA, your EPA permit, which is what we are following and enforcing and doing oversight on, basically you are required to do an inspection of your site at least once every 7 calendar days. You are also required within 24 hours after any storm greater than 1/2 inch of rain in a 24-hour period to do an inspection. These inspections are required to be performed by a qualified inspection personnel to ensure that the BMP practices are functioning correctly and that they're being maintained. There is a sample checklist, inspection checklist provided by the EPA. It's available on our site. You can choose to use that one, or if your company has one, as long as it's meeting the same requirements of the EPA, you may use your own checklist. It's not unusual that we'll see housing builders using a different one than the development one, because obviously you may not be having to check everything like you would for a full site when it's under development. All your sediment control must be in place prior to grading and within 7 days of your first grubbing. All temporary permanent control practices have to be maintained during construction and repair as needed to make sure they're functioning correctly. This is until all slope areas are permanently stabilized. Here's an example of the EPA's construction site inspection checklist. Again, this is available on our website. And again, this basically walks you through what you're required to check on a site. Essentially, the things it's asking you to look at is your temporary stabilization, your construction entrances to make sure they're installed correctly. If you have sediment ponds or sediment barriers, to make sure those are installed correctly and still functioning correctly and being maintained. Your inlet protection, like on your catch basins. Is your permanent stabilization in place? Is there any other pollution control methods that you have in place on your site? Some basic principles, making sure that you're minimizing the amount of area that you have disturbed during construction, that you're inspecting the site regularly, having those BMPs being maintained, especially after rain events, because we don't want the sediment going down to the catch basins, down to the creeks, those type of things, or your pollutants. You may, during construction, have to change your SWIP plan. You may have to modify where your BMPs are. You may have to add additional BMPs. If you need to do that, you need to modify your SWIP plan and resubmit that to us. You have a couple options when it comes to when you're doing such as a housing development. You have your overall site and then you have your individual lots. You can read more on this on the website by the EPA, but essentially the developer is typically the one that holds the permit with the EPA and is ultimately responsible. That developer, once he constructs the development, he can choose to continue to be responsible for that permit, or he can transfer the permit responsibility to those lot owners, which is typically your home builders that are building, and then they become responsible for the for the inspection and the BMP. That is something between the developer and the home builder that you need to work out, and we need to know what you are doing, who's ultimately going to be responsible for those inspections. When the site is completely stabilized, notify us and also notify the EPA by completing a notice of termination. This terminates you having to further do inspections on your site. The EPA, we have a good relationship with our local office here. So when you submit a notice of termination with the EPA saying your site is done, it is stabilized, and from that perspective, the EPA will contact us, see if we concur, and if so, then your permit will be closed out. As far as when you're putting together your SWIP plan and your drainage calculations, you want to use the latest version of the Ohio Rainwater and Land Development Manual. Currently, they are upgrading the manual, but you can visit it on the website. So for you, what does this mean for you as a contractor, as a developer, as a subcontractor, or who's responsible for maintaining the site? Here's some tips for you that we encourage you to follow to be able to keep you compliant. And this is keeping you compliant with the EPA. This is keeping you compliant with us. Make sure you are only using the designated construction site entrances and they are constructed correctly. That is to keep anything leaving your site and tracking out onto the street. That is one of the very common complaints we get and we have to come down on you about. So make sure they're constructed with twos, make sure they've got fabric under them, make sure they're where they are on the SWIP plan that we have approved, and that those are the only entrances that are being used. Keep your equipment away, have you and your contractors keep your equipment away from silt fences, wattles, sediment barriers, fiber rolls, etc. We are finding in housing developments, the use of wattles across the front of the lot are not very effective when it comes to subcontractors. They're typically being drove over by subcontractors and they're parking in front lots and then tracking mud out onto the road. We would encourage you to use silt fence. You're not required. Wattles have their place, but unfortunately with all the amount of development that's happening in these plats right now, subs are parking pretty much anywhere. We are finding they are less likely to drive over silt fence than they are wattles. Know where the locations of the disposal areas are for proper disposal of trash, your concrete washouts, your hazardous chemicals, etc. Making sure you're keeping your soils, your stockpiles, any liquids, your gas storage, those fuel storage, those type of things away from paved areas and storm and drain inlets. And do not sweep or wash anything into the storm drain. That means not washing out your concrete trucks into the catch basins and not sweeping everything into your catch basins. Know where your spill kits are for your site. You should have a spill kit on your site, and the proper use of those should be known by your staff. Know the location of your site designated protection areas. So if you have areas that are not allowed to be disturbed, highly encourage to have those marked. That's actually a requirement. Have those areas marked, put silt fence around those type of things. Make it very clear that those areas cannot be disturbed. Areas that you are stabilizing, that you have mulched or seeded. Again, we encourage you to post signs on these areas so that the equipment stays off of those so you can get that stabilized. If you have a problem area on your site, know what those are so that those items can be addressed. Common things that we are seeing on sites: unstable sites and soils. As you can see, the rills on the left, stormwater, no inlet protection on catch basins, erosion, and your silt fence not being properly maintained. We do not allow the use of straw bales. Do not bring them on a site. They don't work. So some common compliance problems we see during inspection that we ask you to kind of take in so that you can avoid these problems. We encourage you to use phasing, grading, and temporary or permanent cover. In general, you are supposed to phase your grading activity so that only the portion of the site that is exposed is what is being disturbed. We're seeing problems with sediment control devices not being on site, silt fence not being installed, sediment barriers, sediment traps, basins not being in place before activities begin, working out of phase. You need to make sure your temporary stockpiles are seeded, covered, or have silt fence around those. And those stockpiles should never be placed on paved surfaces. Not having proper inlet protection in place. There should be devices on all of your storm drain inlets until your site is completely stabilized. Not having the BMPs in to minimize vehicle tracking onto the road. Again, talking about either having a construction entrance, having steel wash racks, those type of things. Improper disposal of materials, so of your solid waste or where materials are being stored. Dewatering. If you are dewatering, you need to follow proper procedures on how you are doing dewatering. Doing proper washout of your concrete, paint, stucco, etc. We know there is a shortage of concrete washout containers. We are fine with you building your own as long as they are constructed correctly using straw bales, those type of things. As long as you're doing them correctly, we are fine with those. And again, not doing correct BMP maintenance after rain events, after they've been knocked down, those type of things. And finally, inadequate documentation or training of your staff. And I'll kind of walk through, but you should make sure you have your SWIP plan on site, and then making sure your inspection reports are up to date and provided to us at Greene County. Here's a great document that the EPA has out that kind of talks about the different types of BMPs and what are those ways those should be maintained. What's the good and what's the bad? And some of these should look familiar with what I just discussed. This is the quick Cliff Note version of essentially what you're required to do as far as developing the plan, BMPs, how to maintain it, and ultimately close out your permit when you're done constructing. So this is a good little Cliff Note version to have of your requirements. Here at Greene County, when I took over as drainage engineer, as county engineer, we looked at what was the best way to be able to do compliance on sites and tracking. So we have gone with SwiftTrack. This is a program that is being used by multiple departments. ODOT is now using this on their sites. Many of the agencies around us are using this, as well as other counties in the state also. So the good thing is, this provides consistency when it comes to inspections. It does compliance tracking, automatic reporting, those type of things. And when you're jumping around the state now, you'll kind of have some consistency as you're moving around the state. How it works is essentially it is an app that works on our phones. And basically this allows our inspectors to be able to verify that the site is staying compliant. It has some great features into it. When our inspectors walk onto the site, it knows what site they are in. It's got GPS built in it, everything else. It's got the checklist built into it. So essentially when they are doing the compliance checking, it's walking them through checking things such as your construction entrance, your inlet protection, those type of things to see if those are in compliance. Allows us the ability to be able to attach pictures if there is an issue, so you're aware of it, and then provide that information back to you. So this software allows us to create and send reports. It also allows us to store your reports. If we find that there are maintenance items and corrective action that needs to be completed on your site, essentially that will be captured in our app and immediately sent to you, and with what items need to be corrected and with photos if needed, so they can show you a picture of the construction entrance they're talking about or the inlet protection that needs cleaned off. This allows us to have the documentation. Obviously, our inspectors will still be talking to you, but this allows the checks and balances and the documentation we're required to do with the EPA, and to make sure all of you as stakeholders know what are the expectations and requirements. It also allows us to keep track of work items. So when something is not compliant, that becomes a work item. We need you to respond to those from that standpoint. It allows us to keep track of when inspections are due. It also allows you to keep track of when inspections are due. It also is able to tell you when a rain event has occurred. So it uses GPS and it uses the National Weather Service information to know for your specific site whether you have had a half-inch rain event on your site or not, and it will actually notify you of that. So as I mentioned before, when my inspectors are out doing their site inspection, if they notice something that is not compliant, they will note that in the app. That will be logged into the system, and that report is created and sent to you. Those will include notes, photos, those type of things. When you get these, we need you to respond. That means taking care of that issue that is needed to be done. You will get the email. You will be able to respond once that item is complete. You can upload a picture showing, hey, I've fixed the construction entrance, include a picture and say that you fixed it. That will come back to us. We will confirm that the item is complete or not. If it is complete, that item will be closed out. That's when the clock starts on that. If you do not respond, the system automatically sends out a reminder email. This is not us writing you up every single time. It's the initial inspection that started the clock running on this. And then, as I said, it's going to keep sending you a reminder saying you have not completed this work item that needs to be done. So until you fix the item and until you let us know you completed it, you will keep getting that same email reminder that that is an outstanding item, that you need to get that item completed. Again, once you've remediated that issue, then include a picture if you want with that, what you have done. We will close out that work item, and then that will be able to move forward. This is not only providing documentation for us, but also documentation for you with the EPA, showing that you and us are being compliant with your EPA permit requirements. Just some examples of screenshots from our side, where we are able to see outstanding work items, we're able to see rain events, examples of reports. So what is your role? Your role, per your EPA permit requirements, you need to be performing your weekly inspections. We ask that you upload those into our software. You will get an email that says your weekly inspection is due. Please upload it. There will be a link. You can upload it as a PDF. Then it'll go in the system from that standpoint. For rain events, if you have a half-inch rain event on your site, you will get an email saying you had a half-inch rain event on your site. Again, there will be a link in that email, and you need to upload your inspection into the system. As far as once we've done compliance checks, if you get an email that you are non-compliant, please complete those work items as soon as possible. Respond back to those emails that you have completed the item so we can verify that and close out the item. Do not ignore those emails. All of us are learning this software. So if for some reason you aren't getting emails you think you should be, or you're questioning why you're getting a particular email, don't assume things. Ask questions. Let us know. We will walk you through. We're learning the software just like you guys are. I feel like we're finally getting to the point we all kind of feel more comfortable in the software and kind of have tweaked it based on feedback from you guys as developers and contractors on making this the smoothest operation we can with the system. These are examples of what you will get in an inspection report. So as you can see, my inspectors are able to take a picture showing there's no inlet protection on this. The street needs swept. Those type of things. You're going to know exactly where this occurred, when they were there, what time, what date, and what needs to be done. And see where no washout containers are being used. And tracking right over, driving right over wattles, no construction entrance, and tracking out on the mud. When you need to contact us, send your email to gcstormwater@greenecountyohio.gov. That's also in all the bottom of the emails. That way, it is going to all the inspectors, all the support staff, and myself. This keeps us all in the same loop. We have multiple inspectors that are out on these sites all over the county. So this keeps us all in the loop because you will not have one inspector assigned to just your development. Our inspectors will be bouncing around. So you will always have different inspectors in and out of your plats. We have a lot to cover as far as development that's currently going on. So this is the way we keep in the loop and allow us to be able to respond to your concerns, to questions, those type of things. And that also keeps my inspectors knowing. So if an inspector was out looking at something or responded to your email, then again, they're replying. So it goes out to all the inspectors and staff and myself. We have the ability to give you a link that will allow you to see all the things that are uploaded into the system. So this is where you can see your stormwater reports, inspection reports that you have uploaded into our system. You will be able to go into this Google Drive link and be able to see them for your development. You will also be able to see any inspections that we have done. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or my inspectors. Hopefully you find this training helpful for you. We will be, as we get a little more time, we will be re-recording this, make it a little more clear, but we wanted to get this done so that you guys have better information currently. And with that, I appreciate your time of watching this video, and we look forward to working with you and keeping all of us compliant with the EPA stormwater requirements. Thank you.